In the early years of the 20th century, Europe presented a dazzling picture of progress and power. Grand cities buzzed with new technologies, automobiles sharing the streets with horse-drawn carriages, steam trains connecting empires, and electric lights illuminating a world that seemed to be racing toward an ever brighter future. On the surface, it was an age of optimism, a belle epoque of culture, science, and industry. But beneath this glittering facade, deep and dangerous currents were pulling the continent toward a cataclysm unlike any seen before. The peace was fragile, a thin veneer over decades of simmering tension. Four powerful forces were silently conspiring to unravel this peace, each one feeding the others in a deadly cycle. The first was militarism. Across the continent, a massive arms race was underway. Nations believed that to be great, they must be strong, and strength was measured in steel and firepower. Germany, under Kaiser Wilhelm II, embarked on a naval expansion to challenge Britain's long-held dominance of the seas. Fleets of massive dreadnought battleships were constructed, each a floating fortress of immense power. On land, armies grew to unprecedented sizes. Conscription became the norm, and millions of young men were trained for a war that many leaders saw as not just possible, but inevitable. Factories churned out rifles, machine guns, and artillery pieces at a feverish pace. Military parades became grand displays of national pride, with endless columns of soldiers marching in perfect synchrony, a symbol of the disciplined, industrial-scale warfare that was to come. The message was clear. In this new era, diplomacy would be backed by the cannon. The second force was alliances. In a climate of growing distrust, European nations sought security by forming complex webs of mutual defense pacts. They pledged to defend one another if attacked. In response, the Triple Entente was formed, linking France, Russia, and Great Britain in a powerful counterweight. These alliances were meant to keep the peace through a balance of power. But in reality, they created an inescapable trap. They were tripwires. An attack on one nation would not be a localized conflict. It would trigger a chain reaction, pulling one country after another into the fray. Europe was divided into two armed camps, each staring warily at the other, their destinies now intertwined. A conflict in a distant corner of the continent could now engulf them all. The third force was imperialism. The great powers of Europe were not just rivals on their own continent. They were competitors in a global race for empire. For decades, they had scrambled to claim vast territories across Africa, Asia, and the Pacific. Colonies were a source of raw materials for their factories, new markets for their goods, and a powerful symbol of national prestige. A map of the world showed vast swaths of color British pink, French blue, German brown, all representing a dominion carved out by force and ambition. This imperial competition created friction far from Europe's shores. Clashes over colonial territories in places like Morocco and Central Africa nearly brought nations to war on several occasions. The hunger for empire fueled the arms race and poisoned international relations, creating a zero-sum game where one nation's gain was seen as another's loss. The world was a chessboard, and the great powers were playing for the highest stakes. The final, and perhaps most explosive force, was nationalism. Across Europe, a fierce sense of national pride and identity was on the rise. For some, like the Germans and the British, it was a belief in their own cultural and military superiority. For others, it was a burning desire for independence. Ethnic groups trapped within the crumbling old empires, the Austro-Hungarian, the Ottoman, and the Russian, dreamed of forging their own nations. Nowhere was this more volatile than in the Balkans. Known as the powder keg of Europe, this region was a chaotic mix of ethnicities, religions, and competing ambitions. Serbia, newly independent, dreamed of uniting all Slavic peoples under its banner. a vision that directly threatened the integrity of the neighboring Austro-Hungarian Empire, which ruled over millions of Slavs. Russia, seeing itself as the protector of the Slavic peoples, supported Serbia's ambitions. Austria-Hungary, a multi-ethnic empire terrified of breaking apart, was determined to crush this nationalist threat. The Balkans became a tinderbox, waiting for a single spark. That spark came on a sunny morning, June 28, 1914, in the city of Sarajevo, the capital of the Austro-Hungarian province of Bosnia. Archduke Franz Ferdinand, heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne, and his wife Sophie were visiting the city. Their visit was seen by Serbian nationalists as a provocative display of imperial power on a day of great national significance for Serbia. As their open-topped car moved through the crowded streets, a small group of assassins, armed and trained by a shadowy Serbian nationalist group known as the Black Hand, lay in wait. The first attempt on the Archduke's life failed. A bomb bounced off his car and exploded, injuring bystanders. But later that day, fate took a disastrous turn. The Archduke's driver made a wrong turn, and by sheer chance, the car stopped just a few feet away from one of the conspirators, a 19-year-old student named Gavrilo Princip. He didn't hesitate. He raised his pistol and fired 2 shots. One struck Sophie, the other hit Franz Ferdinand. Within minutes, they were both dead. The assassination sent shockwaves across Europe. Austria-Hungary, outraged and determined to make an example of Serbia, saw its chance to crush the nationalist threat once and for all. They issued a harsh ultimatum to Serbia, a list of demands so severe that it was impossible to accept fully. Behind Austria-Hungary stood Germany, offering a blank check of unconditional support for whatever action its ally chose to take. When Serbia refused to meet all the demands, Austria-Hungary declared war on July 28th, exactly 1 month after the assassination. The powder keg had been ignited. Russia, unwilling to see Serbia crushed, began to mobilize its massive army in defense of its Slavic ally. Germany, seeing Russian mobilization as a direct threat, declared war on Russia. Bound by its alliance with Russia, France began to mobilize its own forces. Germany, facing a 2-front war against both France and Russia, activated its long-held military strategy, the Schlieffen Plan. This plan called for a rapid invasion of France by sweeping through neutral Belgium, defeating the French quickly, and then turning to face the slower mobilizing Russians in the east. On August 3rd, Germany declared war on France. The next day, German troops poured across the border into Belgium. Great Britain, which had guaranteed Belgian neutrality and feared a dominant Germany controlling the continent, delivered an ultimatum to Berlin: withdraw from Belgium or face war. Germany refused. On August 4, 1914, Britain declared war on Germany. In just over a month, a political assassination in a provincial city had plunged an entire continent into chaos. The ticking clocks in the foreign ministries had run out. The urgent telegrams had failed. The intricate web of militarism, alliances, imperialism, and nationalism had finally snapped. Millions of men, cheering and singing patriotic songs, boarded trains to head to the front. Most believed it would be a short, glorious adventure, a swift victory that would have them home by Christmas. They could not have been more wrong. They were marching into a new kind of war, a global conflict of unprecedented brutality and scale. The lights were going out all over Europe. The Great War had begun. Thanks for watching. If you found this journey into history compelling, please like this video and subscribe for more deep dives into the events that shaped our world.